All right, what's up, folks? Let me get this adjusted to where I feel is pretty darn good. That's good, huh? Yeah. No. Yeah. There we go. Okay. Throat clear. I try to not ever clear my throat. I pretty much don't ever do it, just because really all that means is that your body's in an unnatural position to a degree, and we'll get into that. Let's talk about this. This is episode 17 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, a clothing company that is so much more than just a clothing company. We talk about the human body. We're called In the Image Clothing Company because we're all universally designed in the image of our living God, who is Jesus Christ. And we allow the body to work here. We do it through mostly clothing because it's the only thing that's placed physically on our physical bodies at all times. So it's the only thing that has the potential to alter our bodies to that degree. So it needs to stay centered, it needs to fit correct, pants entirely above the hips, slightly higher in the front than the rear, the seams on the tops of the shoulders behind that little bone that's actually your collarbone to allow them to be in their natural position, and then those edge seams right at the very edges ideally. And if we're talking about another ideally they're always, they meaning the clothing that we wear, it's always made out of 100% natural materials if we can, because the body's natural. So we need to mesh it with nature, because these unnatural man-made things didn't even exist until, decades ago, really. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, let's get into this. I've got two prerequisites that I've had since before In the Image Clothing Company was even a thing, just to allow the body to have a chance to function natural, and then we get into depth from there. And the first one is to lace your shoes with the technique that we use. You can find how to do that anywhere you find In the Image Clothing Company online in modern 2024. Included with the technique is to tie your shoes evenly on both sides over toward the inside, pairing that with our second prerequisite, which is to remove all the tags from everything that you wear, even the shoes, all the way up through all your clothing. And that's just how we start. And then we get into depth from that point with discussing the ways that clothing is altering the body. The other thing that we really touch on a lot is flat things. We live in a modern 2024 where it's a man-made world where things are flat. Our devices that we hold in our hands, our flooring that we walk on, our countertops and tables, they're flat. And there's nothing within nature that would ever be flat to the degree that those things are. And we're living the majority of our lives in and on and holding those things. So we discuss how to just allow the body to work in a modern 2024. That's not how the body would naturally be. And as I always say, natural is the only way the body works. It's not like you could either choose to be natural or something else. The body only works the way that it does. And if we can allow it to do that, then we should never have to stretch. Because it's been given ranges of motion, it should just have those. Because when you're stretching, all you're trying to do is stretch into the ranges of motion that it already has. And they would be there unless or until restricted. And ideally, neither of those things happen, the unlesses or the untils, right? So we show how to get out of these chronic patternings that we get into over years and years and years of imbalances within the body from external things, right? So, yes. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about within this here episode is, this is episode 17, and the last episode 16... Yes? Trying to make sure that was episode 16. I'm pretty sure. I think 16 and 17 are going to be the two. Last episode that I just did, it was actually about an hour before now, was on hydration. And this episode here, I'm going to talk about food. I'm going to get into food, okay? This is what I always say when I'm discussing things that could be opinionated or whatever. We're equal sinful humans. Everything that we do at In the Image Clothing Company is centered around the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's really the main thing that this podcast is discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. Within that, the knowledge of the truth of all things being the gospel of Jesus Christ, we are equal sinful human beings, and we mess up. A lot of times we'll be talking about something, we won't relay the information perfectly because we're just imperfect. And so Anyway, the point being, what we try to do here at In the Image Clothing Company is really keep all of our opinions out of everything that we talk about as best that we can, because there's no point to push an opinion broad spread. It's not going to help anybody, not the person speaking it or the people hearing it. So what I do say within this, I want to try to keep all opinions out, and if I'm not perfect at that, then all right. None of us are perfect at anything, no matter what you want to believe. Okay, so the thing with food, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about what I mentioned within episode 16 about hydration so that I can give a little bit of context coming into this, because I'm going to talk a lot about water within food in this as well. But within episode 16 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Hydration, it's all about hydration misconceptions within modern 2024. I was mentioning how within food that's natural, there's a high level of water content. Okay, I'll give a little bit of like a very short summary of what I was saying within there. Basically, because go watch that episode to find out. But in modern 2024, people are drinking an immense amount of water, way too much. That's actually potentially and really is dehydrating their body, because there's nothing within water that the body actually can use. All water is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen, being H2O, right? The chemical makeup, the way you say it scientifically. So within that, there's nothing the body actually extracts from water. I discussed within there how there's a lot of water within natural food. Okay, that's the context I'm going to say on that, and then go watch episode 16 if you'd like to on hydration in the Image Clothing Company podcast. Okay, but within this, here's the thing: is what I talk about all the time is the body only works the way that it does, right? The human body. We're all universally designed, and we do recognize our differences. If you have something that's very unique to you, then you have something unique to you. We are individuals, but there's like a universal... Well, we have a podcast episode for In the Image Clothing Company titled Universally Designed. You can go watch that if you'd like to know what I mean by that deeper than what I'm saying here. So, the thing though is, if you weigh 300 pounds and you're 6'5" versus if you're a toddler and you weigh like 30 pounds and you're like 1.5 feet tall or 2 feet tall or whatever, with those kind of things, yes, the amounts of food that we eat will be different because there's more body mass. Not that it's a good or bad thing as far as like you should be skinny or you should be stronger, you should have more muscle mass, you should be fatter, you should be whatever, but just for the sake of the physical amount of being that the human has, right? The amount of food that it would take to feed a small toddler versus the amount of food that it would take to feed somebody who's many times that size is just going to be different, okay? There's also different metabolisms. The metabolism of the human body means how the body breaks down food, how quickly it does, is really kind of like, I don't want to get too much into all the technicality of whatever, but if somebody has the word as a high metabolism, that means they could eat like the same amount of food, right, let's say, as somebody else, and their body digests it quicker than the other person, right? I mean, very baseline. If that's, that's a high metabolism versus the person who digests it slower is I don't know how they word it, but just, the opposite end. So, yes, we are individuals in some ways. I recognize that, but the body's digestive system just works the way it does, right? I mean, it has the same things. It's got intestines, it's got stomach, it's got, the way that food gets down to that. It's got any organ that plays into digesting or breaking down food. And then from there, it comes out. Bowel movement and urination comes out of the body. Food and liquid that we ingest. So here's the thing. In modern 2024, a lot of people are eating just an excessive amount of food, okay? And their body's not actually extracting the nutrients that they eat. And so you can eat X amount of food, right? Whatever it is. Let's say you eat like a whole apple. We'll use an apple for this example, so that's a good thing to use. You eat a whole apple, right? And if you eat that apple and just kind of, barely chew it and don't fully break it down in your mouth before you swallow it, and you kind of chomp through it and eat it within like a few minutes, let's take that example, and now let's say on the other hand, you take the same apple, but you take a bite out of that apple and you chew it very thoroughly. You take a few minutes even, which seems long to some people, seemed long to me until I started eating the way that the body works, right? Let's say you're chewing this apple for a good amount of time, because this is the point. People don't chew their food, and not anywhere near thoroughly. And I'll get into why. But, so, the second example, right, the first one you just kind of chomped through the apple, didn't chew it very thorough and just swallowed. Second example, you take the same apple, but you chew it for a good while, right? You take a bite, you leave it in your mouth, and within your mouth, we have saliva, right? Spit. If you were to spit, that's what we would call it, is spit. It's saliva. Within saliva, there's actually stuff in there that breaks down fats and carbohydrates. And your saliva is your body's first form of digestion. Before your food gets anywhere near your digestive system, if you're watching this in visual, you can see. If you're listening in audio, I'm just like pointing to like my mouth, right? Your mouth is quite a ways away from like down below your like ribs, if you will, where your digestive system would sit, you know, right around in there. But even up in your mouth, that's your body's first form of digestion, is that saliva mixing with the food that you put into your body. So all food is, to the body initially, is a foreign thing, right? What's in the body right now, it's used to, and it has accommodated in the way that it does that. But anything that you take from outside of your actual body, I mean, really, your body's sealed up, right? I mean, you go underwater and you don't get water into you. And so anything you place into your body is a foreign thing. And it needs to be introduced correct. So if you take that apple and you let it be in your mouth for a good while and chew it like thoroughly to where it breaks down into very, very, very small pieces, and let your saliva fully coat everything within there, like to a degree that if you're not used to eating, really, again, just the only way the body works, that's not my opinion. That's really what the, saliva's for, and that's what our teeth are for, is to break food down very, very, very small. It might seem like a long time, though, when you start to eat the way the body eats, only, right? It's only natural way. And then when you swallow, try the best that you can to not swallow any air. If you hear audibly a gulp when you swallow, or like noise, it doesn't have to be like that traditional like ooh, like gulp sound, but just if you hear noise, even like within your own head, like in your own, meaning like maybe it's not audible to the people around you, but within yourself, that probably almost guarantees that there's air mixed in with what you've swallowed. And that's going to go into your digestive system, and it's going to just change the way that it works a little bit, or potentially a lot of it. Your digestive system does not want air inside of it. That's something we really, really need to try to avoid, is getting air into our digestive system. So, yeah, most people don't chew thoroughly, but we are in the Image Clothing Company. We talk about the skeletal system of the human body. We talk about the body's position, right? The body only does the things that it does in the way that it does when it comes to breathing, standing, sleeping, pumping blood through the body. Those things, it only does those the way that it does those. We can't tell it how to do it. We can't alter it at all without it changing the way that it's working. So what'll happen is, if people are eating in a position that's not allowing their body to be natural, as far as I talk about this within In the Image Clothing Company videos all the time, where the jaw, one of its natural main functions is to stabilize the entire body. A big part of that is that we breathe and eat food or ingest liquids through this tube that goes through the center of the jaw, right, where your Adam's apple sits. For those of you in audio form, you can't see, but that tube that's like in the front of your neck, right? It's the trachea, right? Yeah. So while you're breathing, your body has to stabilize, and that's through the center of your jaw where you breathe. whether it's through your nose or mouth, and then while you're eating as well. And while you chew, that's really training all the muscles that go up into your head and that go into your jaw and into your neck and your shoulders, because as you chew, you're just basically doing like a workout in a sense for your jaw. Okay? So, yes, if clothing isn't fitting correct, that will alter the position of your jaw. If you're sitting anywhere near 90-degree position of the knees and hips, which I talk about all the time is so absolutely unnatural, but has just become common in modern 2024. But if you go back to the past, it just wasn't that way, because the body just does not work that way. I've talked about that many times within videos for In The Image Clothing Company. Yeah. So, but that's the most common way for people to be eating nowadays, at least here in the United States of America, modern 2024, is they sit at chairs to eat at that height. And that's just really altering, your upper traps can't stay activated, your core can't stay activated, and there's no part of your body that should ever turn off at all or not be activated, because it only works as a whole. And while you're sitting on your hamstrings, being that muscle behind your leg, your upper leg, and your glutes, you're turning off many parts of your body and then trying to chew, and you have to breathe while you chew. And so now you're training your jaw in an incorrect position, and you're breathing through probably your nose only while you're chewing. And so you're training a lot of weird positions. Tags within clothing as well, while you're sitting. Laces collapsing your arches while you're sitting. Shoes potentially tied unevenly. All of these things, and whatever else could possibly be. Also eating with only the right hand if you're right-handed. It's very rare for people to be reaching out to grab food with their left. Plus, the dreaded collar seam, which you can find videos about within In The Image Clothing Company, really restricts that left arm from reaching at all, so that will just change your shoulder's position, and your left shoulder will be higher anyway, and you won't be normally holding your food with your left hand if you can't even reach that side because of the dreaded collar seam, right? There's, within the collars of t-shirts, there's that seam that's normally on the upper left side, and we here at In The Image Clothing Company call it the dreaded collar seam. And we have 3 full videos as of today's date, each showing the modification that I have found to do within that collar seam to allow it to be pretty well normal. It's one of the biggest things within clothing that's causing an imbalance within the human body. So, yes, I was given that collar seam modification through a lot of trial and error and a lot of prayer, actually. It was a whole process. Went through quite a few shirts. But that's something very big to focus on when it comes to eating, because you're training your jaw's positioning, like I'm saying. In addition to all those things that I said that the jaw does naturally, as well as that, it just, your head weighs a good amount of weight, and it's on the top of you, gravity-wise, right? From the ground up is how we look at things gravity-wise. Your head's at the top, and it's just this ball that has to be stabilized. And your jaw stabilizes your whole body and holds your head up, but it does that best when your teeth are, closer to closed, or at least, your tongue has this like natural suction to the roof of your mouth if your body's, centered and everything is operating to the best of within your own situation the way that it's designed to. So when you're chewing, you're opening your jaw and closing it, and you have to keep your head vertical. And so, everything that I was discussing with the position that people eat in is amplified because just the weight of the head. So, yes. Now, that is a lot of the physical positioning things within the body that happens within eating. And we could probably get into more, potentially, but, yeah, because your bite gets changed. The position of your bite, because if you're chewing food, it's not, this isn't a bad thing to a degree, but it's grinding down your teeth. Eventually your teeth will just grind down if they're squishing against something to grind that thing in between them down. Your teeth will also have wear and tear on them. It just happens. There's no way to avoid that. So they're training a positioning, if you will. And if you're always sitting while you eat, then now your teeth are going to be, like, again, not in a bad way, but ground down in the position that you're in most commonly when you sit to eat. And so now going through your entire life, if you mesh your teeth together, they'll go to that position. And so you try to stand vertically with good posture. We don't really use the word posture in the sense of like being conscious of the body here at In The Image Clothing Company, but just try to stand the way that the body would naturally work. That's what people mean when they say good posture. And you've trained your teeth into a position, meaning ground them to where they mesh in a position that was so unnatural, like I discussed, with everything within the body and parts of the body turned off, muscles being pressed against with the seat that you're sitting on, and your core deactivated, and upper traps deactivated, hamstrings deactivated, and many parts of your body, calves and feet, your ankles probably aren't anywhere near a neutral position, and it's imbalanced because you're using your right hand to bring food to your mouth while you're breathing as well, training a pattern. I mean, I'm not trying to cut myself off, I guess. I'm like almost rushing through it, but yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of physical stuff like that that's happening when you eat in a way that's not how the body eats, just centered, right? As if you were to sit or stand, keeping your body activated as a whole. That's just the only way that it actually works. Otherwise, it's compensating in many ways, which is just unnatural. So, and again, natural is just the only way the body actually works, or else you will have pain. That's it. There's no debate or dispute to that. So that's the physical positioning part about eating in modern 2024. And that just wouldn't happen in the past because there was no tables the way that there are nowadays, back when there wasn't, people, and in multiple parts of the world, it's still very common for people to sit on a very low cushion or on the ground to eat, and that's very natural. I'm sitting on the ground now, filming this episode of In The Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 17 on eating. If you're listening in audio form, that's why I say that. If you're seeing this in visual, you can probably tell I'm just sitting on the floor, and that's very natural. So you could eat on the floor, and that's natural for your body. What I almost always do is stand or walk when I eat currently. And that's been great. So the big thing with food is it's just different now than it ever was. There's no opinion or debate to that whatsoever. First of all, if we just think about freezing things in a freezer rather than just in the cold, right? Like where I live, we get cold winters to the point where you could just leave your food outside, and as long as it didn't rise above, the temperature that you would want to keep it at, then it would just be very similar to keeping it in the freezer, the refrigerator or the freezer. But, until they invented refrigerators and freezers that could have food be placed in there for as long as the food could stay, I'm going to use the word edible, without being, damaging to your body to ingest after a certain amount of time, then a lot of what happened is they changed things within food. But then as well with that is, just food that can last on a shelf for a long time, years, that just couldn't happen in the past. And it can't happen any better now unless things are unnatural, except for canning things. A lot of times you can things like you can can jellies or fruits and things and not add anything into there, but really what you're doing is just sealing off all the air so that the air can't get to it to cause it to go bad. But things like shelf boxed foods and packaged things in plastic, there's a couple things going on there. First of all, they have to add things within there. You hear the term preservatives, and we don't have to get into specifics of what materials or ingredients or if they're man-made or natural or unnatural or what, but the point is they're adding something unnatural, even if it's a natural thing, let's say, which I feel like would be very rare. But the point is you're just mixing random things into something else that would never be within that food to cause it to last so much longer. And that's really very, very, very rare if that happens. It's unnatural things that they're using to preserve things in an unnatural way, right? Because in the past you couldn't place something on a shelf, even if you put it in a decently sealed package, it wouldn't last for more than, just a little while. But nowadays it can last months, years in some cases with some things. And a big reason as to why is because they're adding things in there that are unnatural. And maybe it does allow it to be preserved, but now you're also eating whatever has been placed in there that's unnatural. So there's that, but then there's also the fact that it's being placed within plastic. And I talk about plastic within just tags of clothing, and we're not eating clothing usually. Maybe certain cases, huh? You never know, but synthetic plastic tags are, being placed on the spine directly if they're in the rear of the collar or the rear of the pants, but then even just anywhere they're placed against the body, they're inside of clothing. And it's as if you're placing a topical cream on the body to heal what's inside. It seeps into your pores. The synthetic plastic tags do the same thing. But here's the thing. We have, I don't know if we can say most, but probably most of our food here in the United States of America that we have in our grocery stores. I don't know if I can say most, but a lot of it is packaged within plastic. And plastic, as I talk about within tags, is just oil. They just take oil and process it into a shape. Oil, like similar to what you'd put in your car, could be even the same if we're talking about like actual real oil, not synthetic. Well, I mean, even that, right? I mean, a lot of it's synthetic, no matter, I used to work on cars, and so there's conventional oil and then synthetic oil. Conventional is what they actually pump out of the ground, and synthetic they like make in a different way or something. So I don't know. The point being is, no matter what, our food is encased in oil, right? Some type of oil that has been labeled as plastic because they can form it into a shape that can hold food, and it's cheap and easy for them to do, but it's entirely synthetic. And now our food is being stored within that, and no matter how nitpicky you think it is or whatever, no matter what, I mean, if it's placed within that, it's going to partially be within the food that you eat. There goes the thing on the TV. There's some, again, for those audio listeners only, there was some just images going on the TV, kind of like a screensaver type thing behind me, and it just stopped doing that, and now it's just colors up this TV screen. Oh, but how convenient. There's a power button on the TV right here. I'm just going to turn that off. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot within food that's just unnatural nowadays that just couldn't have even possibly been there in the past. Because the thing with plastic and these things that encapsulate our food nowadays, like I said, I would say probably at least the majority of the food that we have at our grocery stores is in plastic. Plastic didn't even exist 100 years ago. I mean, it was within the past 100 years that plastic became something that was commonly used, okay? So, yeah, that's a big thing. And anything, like I said, preserving the food that's unnatural, those kind of things are just going to change the food. It really is. And, that's going into our bodies. That's what's the intention by eating that is to fuel our bodies, and it's just fake. Again, there's no opinion to this or whatever, because it's just, our bodies just have to have what they have to work. And if they're being forced to ingest fake things in these cases, then they can't do anything with it. If there's no nutrients within these things, or if the things that they put within the food are altering the way that the body can utilize the nutrients that's actually in the food itself, then it's just doing those things no matter what. There's no opinion to it. Now, here's the thing with packaged food like that, whether it is something that goes in the fridge and it could last for many months, which is unnatural unless there's things like that, preservatives or ways of packaging it that are just not quite natural, or if it's something that's going into the freezer that could last years, or something that has a long shelf life for the pantry stored at room temperature. whatever one of any of those things it is, a big reason how they allow that to happen is there's very little to no water within that stuff. Because if there were, stuff could grow in it, right? Mold and bacteria and whatever, that kind of stuff needs water to be able to, grow well. And yeah, but the human body needs water to be able to hydrate itself. And so now we've got this kind of double bind where it's almost like bad on both ends. I mean, what they're trying to aid you in is actually damaging you as far as preserving things to help you so that you can have your food last longer within your house without having to go buy more often or as often. Well, those preservatives are damaging you. Just they are. There's no opinion to that. And then in addition to that, they take out most all of the water, and then now the water content that would naturally be within food is just not there. Within the last episode of the podcast that I was mentioning, episode 16 on hydration, I discussed how there's so much water content within things naturally, fruits and vegetables and anything that's in nature, anything that's just food. The only way that it's actually real food, unless we alter it in some way, like preserve it, again, there's no choice of either, because you hear the term like whole foods. Well, that's all there is, unless it's been altered and changed. There's only natural foods unless we change it, because food, being anything that we would ingest, was here before human beings, and it will be here after we are. We're just kind of here on this earth in between, and nature's always here before and after us. So food's only food. We can't make it. As far as us actually making something as human beings, it's only natural. That's the only way there's actual real food that's food. So within whole foods, within real food, there's a lot of water content, and the body needs that to be able to swallow. I mean, you pretty much couldn't swallow at all if you didn't coat your food with saliva. And as I mentioned, might have been within this episode, could have been just only in the last episode on hydration, but saliva is 90, well, I think it's 90 something percent water. Saliva is mostly just water, and it needs to coat your food. So it's like, oh, we know, yeah, it's like what I was saying with the apple. You need to really, really, really coat your food with saliva. Oh yeah, it was within this, because I was saying how, yeah, that's what I'll get into right here, is it's so common for people to be obese in modern 2024 United States of America. And I'm not judging people, because here's the thing. I want to share truth. I want to explain a lot of reasons as to why that could be and why that just really is in a lot of cases. Because your saliva, like I said, it breaks down fats and carbohydrates. And if you know, you don't have to, but if you do know anything about dieting, which is a common thing for people to do, which is in itself kind of a weird thing, but people will intentionally stay away from those two things. Those are just the two main things, is fats and carbohydrates, that people tend to stay away from when they're trying to eat in what they would believe to be healthy. But here's the thing, is if we have the saliva being the first form of digestion that the body has, and the two things really that it digests are